The call came while Daniel Rowe was between meetings, staring at a glass wall that reflected a man he barely recognized anymore. The office was quiet in the way only expensive places get quiet. No phones ringing. No voices raised. Just the faint hum of climate control and the soft tap of fingers on keyboard somewhere behind him. Daniel liked it that way. Silence was predictable. Silence didn't ask anything from him. His phone vibrated once on the desk. A known number. He let it ring. Then something, instinct, maybe guilt, made him answer. Mr. Rowe? The voice on the other end was careful. Neutral. The kind of voice that had practiced delivering difficult news without sounding dramatic. This is Daniel. This is Dr. Franklin. I'm calling about your mother. The room seemed to tilt just slightly. Daniel stood and moved toward the window, his shoes soundless on the carpet. Below him, traffic crawled along like it always did, unaware that something inside him had just shifted. She's had another decline, the doctor said. Cognitively. Faster than we anticipated. Daniel pressed his thumb into the glass. It was cool. Solid. Real. How bad? He asked. Pause. Not long. Long enough. She's still lucid at times, Dr. Franklin said. But the confusion is more frequent. Disorientation. Anxiety. It would be best if you came home. Home. Daniel hadn't called it that in years. I'll be there, he said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. After he hung up, he stayed where he was, staring out at the city that had given him everything his childhood hadn't. Control. Distance. A way to be important without being vulnerable. He sent one message to his assistant. Cleared his schedule. Booked a flight. He didn't call Lydia. That part came later, after he'd already decided he didn't want anyone preparing the house for his arrival. No warnings. No performances. The plane ride was long and uncomfortable, the kind where sleep never fully came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother the way she used to be, upright, sharp, humming while she cooked, correcting his grammar with a raised eyebrow and a half-smile. By the time the car turned onto the familiar road, night had fallen. The house emerged slowly from the dark, lights glowing behind tall windows like eyes that had been watching for a long time. Same limestone exterior. Same iron gate. Same curved driveway that made arrivals feel ceremonial. Daniel stepped out of the SUV and stood there longer than necessary. The air smelled like damp earth and pine. Somewhere nearby, a sprinkler clicked rhythmically. The sound felt too loud. He carried his own bag to the door. No staff rushed out to greet him. That was new. Inside the house was warm. Too warm. The smell hit him first. Cleaning products layered over something fried earlier in the day. Oh, garlic. Familiar but misplaced. He set his bag down and loosened his tie. Then he heard voices. They drifted from deeper inside the house, sharp enough to cut through the quiet. I already told you you ate, a woman's voice said. Tight. Irritated. You can't keep doing this. Another voice answered, thinner, unsteady. I don't remember eating. I'm still hungry. I thought it was morning. Daniel's chest tightened. He took a step forward, then stopped. A third voice entered the space. Come. Controlled. Younger. Let me check the kitchen. It's okay. We'll figure it out. Something about that voice made Daniel move. He walked toward the living room, each step measured, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The lights were bright, too bright, like the house was trying to hide something. When he reached the doorway, the scene froze. His mother sat on the edge of the sofa, shoulders rounded, hands twisting fabric that looked too big for her. She looked smaller than he remembered, fragile in a way that made his throat burn. Standing over her was Lydia, perfectly dressed, irritation sharpened into a thin smile the moment she noticed him. And between them stood a woman Daniel had never seen before. She was black, wearing a plain gray uniform, her body angled just slightly toward his mother. Not touching her. Not hovering. Just there. Like a quiet barrier. Daniel? Lydia said. You're early. His mother looked up then, confusion clearing just enough for recognition to spark. Danny, she whispered. Is that you? Daniel stepped into the room, his gaze never leaving her face. I'm here, he said. Behind him, the front door clicked shut on its own. If you're the kind of person who likes stories that start calm and then slowly reveal what's been hiding in plain sight, stay with me. This is where it begins. Because as Daniel looked at the woman standing protectively in front of his mother, he had no idea that this moment, this quiet, uncomfortable moment, was about to unravel everything he thought he knew about his home, his marriage, and the people he trusted most. Daniel didn't remember taking off his shoes, but they were lined neatly by the door when he noticed them later. Muscle memory. Old habits from a life he hadn't lived in years. The house felt different once he stepped fully inside. Not abandoned. Not chaotic. Just tense. Like every room was holding its breath. He followed his mother's gaze as she looked up at him, her eyes searching his face as if checking whether he was real or something her mind had invented. Daniel crossed the room and knelt in front of her. The carpet smelled faintly of detergent and something older beneath it, like memories soaked too deep to scrub out. It's me, he said again, softer this time. I'm home. Her fingers closed around his hand with surprising strength. You're late, she murmured. You always say you'll come sooner. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Lydia shifted behind him. She's been like this all afternoon, Lydia said quickly. Confused. Fixated on food for some reason. Daniel didn't look at her. He studied his mother's face instead. The faint bruise-yellow discoloration on her wrist. The way her shoulders tensed when Lydia spoke. Are you hungry? He asked Eleanor. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked past him toward Lydia, then back. I don't want to be trouble. Daniel stood slowly. Who is she? He asked, nodding toward the woman in gray. The woman straightened, her posture respectful but steady. My name is Simone, she said. I help care for your mother. Temporary, Lydia added too fast. Through an agency. Daniel's eyes lingered on Simone. There was something grounded about her. Not defensive. Not eager. Just present. How long? He asked. 6 months, Simone said. 6 months. And no one had mentioned her. Daniel turned back to his mother. Let's get you something to eat. Lydia exhaled sharply. Daniel, she already? I'll handle it, he said. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Simone moved first, offering her arm. Eleanor accepted it without hesitation, leaning into her as they walked toward the kitchen. That small gesture stayed with Daniel. Trust like that wasn't given lightly. The kitchen lights flicked on, revealing a space that had once been his mother's pride. Everything was spotless now. Too spotless. No clutter. No personality. Just efficiency. Simone moved calmly, pulling out a saucepan, filling it with water. Something light, she said to Eleanor. You'll feel better. Eleanor nodded, already relaxing. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching. The way Simone spoke wasn't patronizing. It was matter-of-fact, gentle without being sugary. Behind him, Lydia hovered. You should rest, she told Eleanor. You've had a long day. Eleanor looked uncertain. Daniel stepped in. She'll eat first. Lydia's smile tightened. Of course. Dinner was quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed in on you. Eleanor ate slowly, pausing between bites as if the act required concentration. Simone stayed nearby, cleaning as she went, never rushing her. Daniel noticed everything. The way Lydia checked her phone repeatedly. The way Simone positioned herself so Eleanor always stayed in her line of sight. The way Eleanor flinched when Lydia reached for the salt too abruptly. When Eleanor finished, Simone helped her to her room. I'll be back, Simone said to Daniel. Not asking. Informing. Lydia let out a breath she'd been holding. She's very involved. Daniel turned to her. She's doing her job. You weren't here, Lydia snapped. You don't see what I deal with. Daniel studied his wife. Her makeup was flawless. Her posture perfect. But there was an edge to her eyes he didn't remember. I'm here now, he said. Lydia's expression softened, but it didn't reach her eyes. I've been holding everything together. Daniel nodded slowly. He wanted to believe her. Wanted the discomfort twisting in his stomach to have an easy explanation. Later, alone in the guest room, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the house settle. Pipes clicked. Floorboards creaked. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly. He thought about the bruise on his mother's wrist. He thought about how Eleanor had leaned into Simone without thinking. And he wondered how many moments like that had happened while he was gone. Down the hall, a low voice murmured reassurance. Another answered, thin and frightened. Daniel lay back, staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. Because for the first time since he arrived, he felt it clearly. Something in this house was deeply wrong. And whatever it was, it had learned to hide in plain sight. Daniel woke to the sound of raised voices. Not shouting. Not yet. But sharp enough to cut through sleep like glass. He lay still for a moment, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening. The house was quiet otherwise. No television. No music. Just voices leaking through the hallway, strained and impatient. I already told you you can't do that, Lydia said. Her tone was tight, controlled, like she was speaking to someone who should know better. You're making things harder. Pause. Then his mother's voice, thinner than it should have been. I was just looking for my purse. I need it. You don't need it, Lydia snapped. You're not going anywhere. Daniel's chest tightened. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. The carpet felt cold under his feet as he moved toward the door. I know I put it somewhere, Eleanor said. Your father gave it to me. Daniel stopped breathing for half a second. Your father has been dead for years, Lydia said flatly. You need to stop this. The words landed with a dull thud, like something heavy dropped without care. Then came the third voice. Calm. Firm. Steady. That's enough, Simone said. She's not doing this to upset you. Stay out of it, Lydia snapped. Daniel opened the door. The hallway was bright, almost harsh. Eleanor stood near the console table, one hand gripping the edge as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her purse lay open on the floor, its contents scattered, lipstick, tissues, a faded photograph Daniel recognized instantly. Simone stood between Lydia and Eleanor again. Not touching. Just close enough. Lydia turned when she saw him. Her face shifted instantly. Daniel, she said. Good, you're up. Maybe you can explain to your mother that she doesn't need to carry that thing around the house at 6 in the morning. Daniel didn't answer right away. He bent down and picked up the photograph. It was old, creased at the edges. His parents on a beach, laughing into the wind, his mother's hair wild, her smile unguarded. He handed it to Eleanor. You remember this? He asked gently. Her fingers closed around it. That was our anniversary, she said. Then her face clouded. Or was it yours? That was theirs, Lydia cut in. And that was a long time ago. Simone spoke before Daniel could. It still matters to her. Lydia turned on her. You're crossing a line. Simone didn't raise her voice. I'm doing my job. Daniel straightened. What line is that? He asked. Silence fell hard. Lydia's lips parted, then pressed together. You hired her to help, not to interfere. Daniel looked at his mother. She was trembling now, eyes darting between them, the photograph clutched to her chest. Go sit down, Daniel said softly to Eleanor. I'll be right there. She hesitated, then nodded. Simone walked with her toward the living room, matching her pace, murmuring something Daniel couldn't quite hear. Lydia watched them go, her jaw tight. This is exhausting, she said. Every day it's something new. She accuses me of hiding things. Of lying. Daniel kept his voice even. You don't talk to her like that. I talk to her like someone who's sick, Lydia shot back. You don't know what it's like when you're not around. That doesn't make it okay. Lydia laughed once, sharp and humorless. So now you're judging me? I'm paying attention, Daniel said. She looked at him, then really looked at him, as if recalibrating. You're tired? Jet-lagged? You're seeing things. Daniel didn't respond. In the living room, Eleanor sat curled into the corner of the couch. Simone crouched beside her, speaking quietly. Eleanor nodded, her breathing slowly evening out. Daniel watched them for a long moment. The house felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in, pressing old truths to the surface. Lydia followed his gaze. She's getting too attached, she said. That's not healthy. For who? Daniel asked. Lydia didn't answer. A faint clatter came from the kitchen. A cupboard door opening. Simone moving around, careful not to make noise. Daniel suddenly understood something he hadn't wanted to see before. This wasn't just stress. It was control. And control, once threatened, rarely softened on its own. As Simone returned with a glass of water for Eleanor, Lydia stepped back, crossing her arms, eyes cold. Daniel felt the shift then. Subtle. Dangerous. The house wasn't just holding its breath anymore. It was waiting. Daniel watched Simone more closely after that morning. Not in an obvious way. Not like someone looking for faults. It was quieter than that. Observational. The way you watch when you're trying to understand how a situation really works once the explanations stop making sense. Simone moved through the house like someone who had learned its moods. She knew which floorboards creaked and which didn't. She lowered her voice instinctively near Eleanor, as if loud sounds could bruise her. She kept herself positioned just slightly to the side, never blocking, never demanding attention. But she was always there when it mattered. Late morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows in the living room, catching dust in the air. Eleanor sat in her armchair, folding and unfolding a napkin with slow concentration. Simone sat nearby, pretending to read, her eyes lifting every few seconds. Lydia stood near the doorway, watching them with visible irritation. She's fine on her own, Lydia said, breaking the quiet. You don't need to hover. Simone looked up calmly. I'm not hovering. You're hovering, Lydia insisted. You're making her dependent. Eleanor flinched at the tone. Daniel set his coffee down harder than necessary. Enough. Both women looked at him. I asked Simone to stay close, he said. It helps. Lydia stared at him, clearly surprised. Since when? Since now. The room went still. Simone stood. I'll check lunch, she said, giving Eleanor a small smile before heading toward the kitchen. As soon as she was gone, Lydia let out a breath. She's manipulating you. Daniel turned to her. Explain. She positions herself as the hero, Lydia said. Always stepping in. Always correcting me. Daniel folded his arms. Or maybe she's responding to what she sees. Lydia's eyes flashed. So you believe her over me? I believe what I see. Lydia scoffed and walked away. Daniel didn't follow. He stayed where he was, watching his mother. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she folded the napkin again. You like her, Daniel said gently. Eleanor nodded. She listens. That single word echoed louder than any argument. Later that afternoon, Daniel found Simone in the backyard, hanging laundry on a line that hadn't been used in years. The air smelled like grass and detergent. Birds moved through the trees, unconcerned with human tension. I didn't know that was still back here, Daniel said. Simone smiled faintly. Your mother showed it to me. Said she used to dry your school uniforms out here. Daniel swallowed. I forgot about that. They worked in silence for a moment. She's having a good day, Simone said. Those are becoming less frequent. Daniel nodded. You've done well with her. Simone hesitated. I do my job. That's not what I meant. She glanced at him, measuring something. I try to make her feel safe. Daniel leaned against the fence. Does she not feel safe? Simone's hands paused on a damp sheet. She feels watched, Simone said carefully. Corrected. Like every mistake is proof she's failing. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. By my wife. Simone didn't answer. That was answer enough. As evening approached, the house filled with the sounds of cooking. Simone prepared a simple meal. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, humming softly. Lydia hovered, offering instructions that went ignored. Daniel noticed how Simone never contradicted Lydia directly. She redirected, adjusted, absorbed tension without returning it. But Lydia noticed too. At dinner, Lydia pushed her chair back abruptly. I'm not hungry. She left the table without looking at anyone. Eleanor's humming stopped. Simone reached across the table, touching Eleanor's hand lightly. It's okay, she said. You did nothing wrong. Daniel felt a familiar ache, the kind that came from recognizing a pattern too late. That night, as the house settled into uneasy quiet, Daniel stood outside Simone's room. He hadn't meant to. He told himself he was just checking that everyone was settled. The door was closed. The light beneath it was on. From the other side he heard a soft sound. Not words. Not sobbing. Breathing. Controlled. Like someone holding themselves together. Daniel stepped back. In the hallway, Lydia's door was closed too. No light beneath it. No sound at all. He stood there, suspended between two closed doors, realizing that protection didn't always come from power or money or titles. Sometimes it came from the person willing to stand quietly in the middle. And for the first time since he arrived, Daniel wondered what would happen if that person wasn't there tomorrow. By the fifth morning, Daniel noticed how quickly his mother tired. It wasn't dramatic. There were no sudden collapses or panicked calls for help. It was quieter than that. Subtler. She simply faded faster. Conversations that once stretched comfortably now ended mid-sentence. Tasks that had seemed manageable 2 days ago left her rubbing her temples, confused about why her body wouldn't cooperate. They sat together in the sunroom just after breakfast. Light poured through the glass ceiling, warming the patterned rug beneath their feet. Eleanor sat wrapped in a cardigan even though the room was warm, her hands folded in her lap as if she were waiting for instructions. Daniel sat across from her, watching her face closely. You used to love this room, he said. Remember? You said it felt like being outside without the bugs. Eleanor smiled faintly. Did I? You did, he said. You made me read here when I was grounded. Her brow furrowed. Why were you grounded? Daniel chuckled softly. I skipped school. Her eyes widened. You never did that. I did once, he said. You were furious. She studied him as if searching for confirmation. You're sure that was me? The question landed harder than he expected. Yes, Daniel said gently. It was you. She nodded, but uncertainty lingered in her eyes. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the cardigan. Across the room, Simone pretended to organize a shelf, giving them space without leaving. Lydia stood near the doorway, arms crossed, scrolling through her phone. Eleanor shifted in her seat. I feel like I'm always in the way. Daniel frowned. Why would you think that? She hesitated. People sigh when I talk. They tell me things already happened. Daniel glanced toward Lydia. Lydia didn't look up. You're not in the way, he said firmly. You're home. Eleanor's eyes shimmered. She reached for his hand, her grip shaky. Promise. I promise. But as he said it, he realized how fragile that promise felt. A little later, Simone helped Eleanor stand so they could walk outside. The garden path was uneven in places, stones worn smooth by time. Eleanor moved slowly, leaning on Simone's arm, trusting her balance without question. Daniel walked beside them. You don't have to rush, Simone said softly. We've got time. Eleanor nodded. I like when you say that. Daniel watched how his mother relaxed at those words. How her shoulders dropped. how her breathing slowed. That was when he saw it again. The faint yellow-green bruise on Eleanor's wrist. It was small. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Daniel stopped walking. "What happened there?" he asked, gently lifting her hand. Eleanor looked down, confused. "Where?" "Here," Daniel said, pointing. She squinted. "Oh, I don't know." Simone's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lydia spoke from behind them. "She bumps into things. You know that." Daniel turned. "Do you?" Lydia met his gaze coolly. "Of course." Daniel didn't argue. He just nodded and let it drop. But the image stayed with him. That afternoon, Eleanor napped in her room. Daniel sat at the dining table with his laptop open, pretending to work while his mind replayed every interaction he'd witnessed. Simone passed by quietly, carrying folded towels. "Simone," Daniel said. She stopped. "Has my mother fallen recently?" Simone hesitated. "Just a second." "Long enough." "She's unsteady sometimes," Simone said carefully. "I try to stay close." "That's not what I asked." Simone met his eyes. Her voice stayed calm. "I've never seen her fall hard enough to bruise like that." The room felt colder. Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." That evening, Eleanor refused dinner. "I'm not hungry," she said, pushing the plate away. Her hands trembled. Lydia sighed loudly. "She does this every night." Daniel ignored her. "Do you want something else?" Eleanor shook her head. Her eyes darted toward Lydia, then back to Daniel. "I don't want to be a problem," she whispered. Daniel felt something inside him crack. "You're not a problem," he said louder than he intended. The room went quiet. Lydia stood abruptly. "You're upsetting her." "No," Daniel said. "I think she already was." Lydia stared at him, her expression unreadable. Later, after Eleanor was settled in bed, Daniel stood alone in the hallway. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt neutral. It felt charged. He thought about the bruise. About the way Eleanor watched Lydia before answering simple questions. About how she relaxed only when Simone was near. Daniel realized then that he wasn't just rediscovering his mother. He was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. And what he was beginning to see made him deeply afraid of what the next truth might be. The confrontation didn't happen all at once. It built the way pressure does, quietly, invisibly, until something finally gave. That evening, Daniel waited until the house settled. Eleanor was asleep, the soft glow of a night light spilling under her door. Simone had retreated to her room. The kitchen lights were off, but the faint smell of chamomile lingered in the air. Lydia sat in the living room with a glass of wine, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. The television played on mute, images flickering without sound. Daniel stood across from her, hands in his pockets. "We need to talk," he said. Lydia didn't look up. "About what?" "About how you speak to my mother." She sighed, long and theatrical, and finally set the phone down. "You're doing this now?" "I'm doing this because I'm here," Daniel said. "And I'm seeing things I didn't see before." Lydia swirled the wine in her glass. "You've been gone for years. You fly in for a few days and suddenly you understand everything?" Daniel kept his voice steady. "I understand that she's afraid." "That's the disease," Lydia snapped. "Not me." Daniel took a step closer. "Fear doesn't come from nowhere." Lydia laughed softly. "You're romanticizing it." "She's confused, Daniel. She lies. She accuses. She forgets. And then she looks at me like I've done something wrong." "And how do you respond?" he asked. Lydia's eyes hardened. "I manage it." "By raising your voice?" "By setting boundaries." Daniel shook his head. "By humiliating her?" Lydia stood abruptly, the wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "You have no idea how exhausting it is to repeat yourself every single day. To have your reality questioned constantly." Daniel didn't interrupt. "I didn't sign up for this," she continued. I didn't marry into being a full-time nurse. No one did, Daniel said quietly. But we don't get to choose what people become when they're sick. Lydia stared at him. So now I'm the villain. I didn't say that. But you're thinking it, she shot back. Ever since she showed up. Daniel felt the shift immediately. Simone. Yes, Lydia said sharply. She watches me. Judges me. Always positioning herself like some kind of shield. Because she's protecting my mother. And what about me? Lydia demanded. Who protects me? Daniel hesitated. The silence stretched. Lydia scoffed. Exactly. She searched Simone's room, Daniel said. Lydia froze. Then she recovered quickly. I told you. I found medication I didn't recognize. You went through her things without cause. I had cause, Lydia insisted. She's a stranger living in my house. Daniel's voice lowered. This is my house too. Lydia's face flushed. You weren't here when I was the one getting accused. When your mother told neighbors I was stealing from her. When she forgot my name. And how did you handle that? Daniel asked. I corrected her, Lydia said. Firmly. Daniel exhaled slowly. She's not a child. She acts like one. The words hung in the air, heavy and wrong. Daniel stepped back as if struck. You don't get to strip her dignity because it's inconvenient. Lydia's voice dropped, dangerous now. You're choosing her over me. Daniel shook his head. This isn't a competition. It is when you start taking sides, Lydia said. I'm taking responsibility, he replied. Something I should have done sooner. Lydia's eyes narrowed. You think that woman cares about her beyond a paycheck? Daniel met her gaze. I think she cares more than you're willing to. Lydia laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're naive. People like her know how to perform compassion. Daniel stiffened. Careful. Why? Lydia said. It's true. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. That's enough. Lydia took a step toward him. You want the truth? She's enjoying this. The attention. The power. And you're falling for it. Daniel looked at her, then really looked at her, and realized something unsettling. He didn't recognize this woman. I'm staying, he said. Lydia blinked. Staying? I'm not leaving after the week, Daniel continued. I'm working from here. I want to be present. Lydia's grip tightened on the wineglass. You don't trust me. I don't trust what I don't understand, Daniel said. And cameras? She asked suddenly. Daniel frowned. What about them? Lydia smiled slowly. If you don't trust me, maybe you should install some. The suggestion landed like a dare. Daniel didn't answer. From down the hall, a door creaked softly. Footsteps. Someone moving quietly. Daniel realized then that this conversation wasn't just about hurt feelings or exhaustion. It was about control. And Lydia wasn't ready to give it up. Sleep didn't come easily after that conversation. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar yet foreign sounds of the house at night. Pipes ticked softly as they cooled. Somewhere a clock chimed once, marking an hour he couldn't remember anymore. He thought about Lydia's words. About the way she'd said them. Not tired. Not overwhelmed. Threatened. At 2:13 a.m., a soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. A chair scraping lightly across tile. Daniel sat up. The hallway was dim, lit only by small wall lights meant to guide nighttime steps. He moved quietly, barefoot, following the sound toward the kitchen. The lights were on. Eleanor sat at the table, wrapped in a thick blanket, her shoulders hunched. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested around an empty bowl. Simone stood at the stove, stirring slowly, the flame low. The smell of oats and cinnamon filled the room, warm and familiar in a way that made Daniel's chest ache. Simone turned when she saw him. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway, then back to him. She woke up scared, Simone said softly. Thought someone was in her room. Daniel stepped closer. Does Lydia know? Simone hesitated. Just long enough. She's asleep, Simone said. Daniel understood what that meant. Eleanor looked up at him, relief crossing her face. I told her I wasn't hungry, she said. But I was. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat across from her. You don't ever have to lie about that. She smiled faintly. I didn't want to make anyone mad. The words sat heavy between them. Simone placed the bowl in front of Eleanor. It's warm, she said. Not too much. Eleanor nodded and took a careful spoonful. Her shoulders relaxed almost immediately. Daniel watched, heart tightening. This simple act, food, patience, kindness, felt like something his mother had been denied. They sat in silence for a while. Eleanor ate slowly, stopping often to rest. Simone stayed nearby, pretending to wipe an already clean counter, her attention never straying far. Daniel broke the quiet. How often does this happen? Simone didn't pretend not to understand. Most nights. And Lydia? She doesn't like being woken up, Simone said carefully. Eleanor paused mid-bite. She says I do it on purpose. Daniel's hand curled into a fist under the table. No one thinks that, he said quickly. Eleanor smiled, unconvinced. When the bowl was empty, Simone rinsed it and handed Eleanor a glass of water. Small sips, she reminded gently. Eleanor nodded obediently, like a child trying to behave. Daniel stood. I'll walk you back. Simone hesitated. I know, Daniel said. But I've got her. Simone studied him for a moment, then nodded. The walk down the hall was slow. Eleanor leaned into Daniel's arm, her steps uncertain. At her door she stopped. You're staying this time? She asked. Daniel swallowed. Yes. She searched his face. Promise? I promise. She nodded, satisfied, and went inside. Daniel lingered in the hallway. Simone stood a few feet away, hands clasped loosely in front of her. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. For what? Simone asked. For seeing what needed to be done. She shrugged slightly. I do what I can. Daniel hesitated. Is it always like this? Simone's eyes met his. It's worse when you're gone. The words landed softly, but they cut deep. Daniel stood there long after Simone returned to her room. In the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon still hung in the air. He realized then that the most honest version of his home only revealed itself after midnight. And whatever Lydia believed about control, compassion had already taken root somewhere else in the house. Whether it would be allowed to grow was another question entirely. Morning came slowly, filtered through thin clouds and tall windows that refused to let the day rush in. Daniel sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee that had gone untouched. The house was awake, but it felt guarded, like everyone inside it had learned to move carefully. Eleanor was in the sunroom with Simone, folding napkins again. The same napkin. Over and over. Simone let it happen, correcting nothing, only smiling when Eleanor glanced up as if to ask whether she was doing it right. Lydia entered late, heels clicking sharply against the tile. Why are the lights on in the kitchen? She asked, irritation already threaded through her voice. Electricity doesn't need to run all day. Simone answered calmly. Your mother was cold. Lydia rolled her eyes. She's always cold. Daniel looked up. Then maybe we listen to her. Lydia paused, surprised by his tone. I didn't realize we were taking instructions now. We're taking cues, Daniel said. From the person who actually needs care. The room went quiet. Eleanor sensed it immediately. Her hands stilled. Did I do something wrong? No, Daniel and Simone said at the same time. Eleanor smiled faintly, reassured, and went back to folding. Lydia watched the exchange, lips pressed tight. Later that morning, Daniel found Simone in the hallway, organizing a small tray with medication and notes written neatly on a pad. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. She looked up. Of course. Off the record. Simone nodded slowly. They stepped into the laundry room. The dryer hummed softly, filling the space with warmth and white noise. "I need to know," Daniel said, keeping his voice low. "Is my wife hurting my mother?" Simone didn't answer right away. She leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely, not defensive, just bracing herself. "I don't accuse," she said finally. "I observe." Daniel waited. "She grabs too hard when she's frustrated," Simone continued. "She speaks like your mother understands more than she does. And when your mother gets confused, she's punished for it." Daniel's throat tightened. "Punished how?" "Isolation," Simone said. "Coldness. Fear." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Why didn't you report it?" Simone met his eyes. "I did. To the agency. They reassigned others before me. They didn't want trouble." Daniel felt a chill run through him. "And you stayed?" Simone nodded. "Because your mother asked me not to leave." The words hung heavy in the air. "She said everyone leaves eventually," Simone added quietly. "She wanted someone who wouldn't." Daniel looked down at the floor. "You should have told me." Simone shook her head. "You weren't ready to hear it." That stung because it was true. That afternoon, Lydia confronted Simone openly. "I don't like secrets," Lydia said, standing in the doorway of Simone's room. "And I don't like whispers." Simone kept folding clothes. "I don't whisper." "You talk to my husband," Lydia snapped. "About me." Simone paused. "I talk about your mother." Lydia stepped closer. "You think you're better than me?" Simone looked up, calm but firm. "No. I think your mother deserves dignity." Lydia laughed softly. "You're very good at this." "At what?" "Playing innocent." Simone stood. "If you have a concern, address it professionally." "Oh, I will," Lydia said. "Trust me." That evening, Daniel noticed something small but telling. Eleanor's bedroom door was locked. "Why is this locked?" he asked Lydia. "So she doesn't wander," Lydia replied. Daniel frowned. "At night. She's safer that way." Daniel unlocked the door without another word. Inside, Eleanor sat on the bed, clutching her blanket. "I didn't like it," she whispered. "I thought I was in trouble." Daniel's chest ached. He tucked her in himself that night, staying longer than necessary. As he stood to leave, Eleanor grabbed his hand. "She doesn't like me anymore," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. "That's not true." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. In the hallway, Lydia waited. "She needs structure," Lydia said. "You're undermining me." Daniel looked at her, truly looked at her. "I'm protecting her," he said. Lydia's eyes hardened. "So is she." Daniel understood then. This wasn't just tension. It was a quiet war. And he was standing in the middle, running out of time to choose sides. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling while Lydia's breathing stayed steady beside him. Every sound in the house felt louder than it should have been. The ticking clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of wood settling under the weight of secrets. Around 2:17 a.m. he heard it. A muffled sound. Not a cry. Not a scream. A whimper. Daniel sat up instantly. Lydia didn't stir. He slid out of bed and moved quietly into the hallway. The house was dark, but his feet knew the path to his mother's room. When he reached the door, it was closed. Unlocked. That alone made his stomach tighten. He opened it slowly. Eleanor was sitting upright in bed, shaking. Her blanket had fallen to the floor. Her eyes were wide, glassy, searching. "Mom?" Daniel whispered. She looked at him like she was seeing a ghost. "I didn't mean to," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to make her angry." Daniel crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt in front of her. "No one should be angry at you," he said softly. "What happened?" Eleanor's lips trembled. "I wet the bed." Daniel froze. "I told her I was sorry," Eleanor continued, voice barely audible. I tried to clean it, but she said I was being difficult. She said I was embarrassing her. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, pain flashing hot behind them. Did she hurt you? He asked gently. Eleanor hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any scream. She squeezed my arm, Eleanor said finally. Not to hurt. Just to remind me. Daniel felt something break inside him. He helped his mother change, his hands steady even as his heart raged. He washed the sheets himself, ignoring the hour, ignoring the fact that this should never have been his responsibility in the first place. When Eleanor was settled again, Daniel kissed her forehead. You're safe, he said. I promise. But as he said it, he realized how fragile that promise was. The next morning, Simone noticed immediately. She saw the dark circles under Daniel's eyes. The way his jaw stayed clenched. The way he watched Lydia instead of listening to her. Did something happen? Simone asked quietly while helping Eleanor with breakfast. Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. Yes. Simone didn't push. She didn't ask in front of Eleanor. She simply met Daniel's gaze and understood that the line had finally been crossed. Later that day, Daniel took a day off work. Lydia was irritated. You can't just cancel meetings because of feelings. They're not feelings, Daniel replied. They're facts. He asked Simone to join him in the study. I need your honesty, he said. And I need proof. Simone inhaled slowly. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. Daniel frowned. Why? Because once you see it, she said, you won't be able to unsee it. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I keep notes, Simone explained. Times, dates, behavioral changes, bruises that weren't there before, fear responses, locked doors, missed meals. Daniel felt sick as she scrolled. There's more, Simone said quietly. But this is the hardest part. She tapped a video. Daniel watched as a short clip played. It showed Eleanor standing in the hallway, confused, asking where the bathroom was. Lydia's voice followed, sharp and controlled. How many times do I have to tell you? Stop pretending you don't know. Eleanor's shoulders flinched. I'm not pretending, she said softly. The video ended. Daniel stared at the blank screen. That was 2 weeks ago, Simone said. I recorded it in case someone finally listened. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the room. I should have known, he muttered. I should have seen it. Simone spoke carefully. Guilt won't protect her now. That afternoon, Lydia discovered something was wrong. She found Daniel's study door locked. Since when do you lock doors? She texted. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he called a lawyer. Then Adult Protective Services. Then his sister, whom he hadn't spoken to in months. By evening, the house felt different. Charge. Lydia confronted him in the kitchen. You're acting strange, she said. What's going on? Daniel met her eyes. I know. Her smile faltered. Know what? I know what you've been doing to my mother. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. You're choosing her over me? Lydia whispered. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. I'm choosing what's right, he said. Lydia laughed, a short, brittle sound. You're being manipulated. By a maid. Simone appeared in the doorway, calm as ever. I'm a caregiver, she said. And I've done my job. Lydia's eyes burned with fury. This isn't over, she said. Daniel believed her. But for the first time he wasn't afraid. Because now the truth was no longer hidden. And once truth steps into the light, someone always loses control. In this house the balance was shifting. And Lydia could feel it slipping through her fingers. The knock came just after noon. 3 firm raps. Not rushed. Not polite. Authoritative. Daniel was already on his feet before the sound finished echoing through the house. Lydia froze near the kitchen island, her hand tightening around her phone as if she might throw it, or hide it, depending on what happened next. Simone glanced toward the hallway, then at Daniel. That'll be them. Daniel nodded once. His pulse felt loud in his ears as he opened the door. Two women stood on the porch. One held a slim folder under her arm. The other wore a neutral expression that suggested she'd seen every version of denial imaginable. "Daniel Price?" the woman with the folder asked. "Yes. I'm Karen Holt. This is my colleague, Denise Morales. We're with Adult Protective Services." Daniel stepped aside. "Please, come in." Lydia moved quickly past him, her smile snapping into place like a mask she'd practiced in the mirror. "Oh my goodness," she said brightly. "This must be a misunderstanding." Karen's eyes flicked to Lydia, then past her, scanning the home. "We'd like to speak with Eleanor Price." Daniel gestured toward the living room. "She's resting. I'll get her." "I'll go," Lydia said immediately. "No," Daniel replied, his voice calm but firm. "I will." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. When Daniel returned with his mother, Eleanor walked slowly, leaning on her cane. She wore a pale blue cardigan Simone had chosen that morning, soft and warm. Eleanor looked small in the large room, but her eyes were alert. Karen crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "Mrs. Price, we're here to make sure you're safe. Is that okay?" Eleanor glanced at Daniel. Then at Simone. She nodded. "Yes." They spoke privately in the den. The door stayed open, but Lydia paced just outside, her heels clicking against the hardwood in uneven rhythms. Minutes stretched. Daniel sat with his hands clasped, staring at the floor. Simone stood near the window, watching the leaves outside sway in the breeze. Finally, the women emerged. Karen's expression had shifted. Not dramatic, but resolved. "We'll need to conduct a full assessment," she said. "Effective immediately." Lydia scoffed. "This is ridiculous. My husband is overreacting." Denise spoke calmly. "Mrs. Price, we'll also need to review caregiving arrangements." "I am her caregiver," Lydia snapped. Karen met her gaze. "That may change." The words landed heavy. That afternoon blurred into interviews, notes, and quiet murmurs. Eleanor answered questions slowly, sometimes pausing, sometimes forgetting. But when asked how she felt in her own home, her voice steadied. "I feel like I have to be careful," she said, "so I don't upset anyone." Lydia's jaw clenched. By evening, Daniel received the first recommendation. Temporary removal of Lydia from caregiving duties. Daniel read the document twice. Lydia read it once and laughed. "You think this means something?" "It does," Daniel said quietly. That night, Lydia didn't sleep in their bed. She chose the guest room instead, slamming the door hard enough to rattle frames on the wall. Around midnight, Simone was in Eleanor's room, adjusting her pillows when Eleanor whispered, "She's angry." Simone smoothed her hair. "You're not in trouble." "I heard her on the phone," Eleanor murmured. She said she wouldn't be humiliated." Simone stilled. The next morning, Daniel found Lydia in the kitchen, typing furiously on her laptop. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Protecting myself." "From what?" he asked. "From you," she replied coolly. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. By noon his lawyer called. "Daniel," the man said, voice tight, "your wife has filed a complaint." Daniel sank into a chair. "About what?" "She's alleging neglect," the lawyer said. "Against Simone." Daniel stood. "That's absurd." "It gets worse," the lawyer continued. "She's also claiming your mother is being coached." Daniel closed his eyes. Across the house, Simone was packing her bag. "I'll cooperate fully," she said when Daniel confronted her. "I'm not worried." "But I am," Daniel replied. Simone met his eyes. This is what people like her do when control slips. They redirect. That evening, Eleanor grew quiet. She barely touched her dinner. When Daniel asked if she was tired, she shook her head. "I don't want to sleep." Why? Because when I do, she whispered, people decide things for me. Daniel took her hand, feeling how thin her fingers were. I won't let that happen, he said. But as he spoke, his phone buzzed again. Another message from his lawyer. 3 words this time. Emergency hearing scheduled. Daniel looked up toward the guest room door. Behind it, Lydia was making moves he hadn't anticipated. And the fight for truth was no longer private. It was about to become very public. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old paper. Daniel noticed it the moment he stepped through the metal detectors, the scent clinging to his lungs in a way that made breathing feel deliberate. Eleanor walked beside him, slower than usual, her hand wrapped tightly around his arm. Simone followed a step behind, her posture straight, her expression calm in a way that felt almost defiant. Lydia arrived separately. She swept into the hallway with a confidence that bordered on theatrical, dressed in a tailored gray suit Daniel had never seen before. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her face carried a softness she rarely used at home. She smiled when she saw Eleanor. "Mom," she said warmly, "you look nice today." Eleanor's fingers tightened around Daniel's sleeve. They were ushered into a small hearing room. No jury. Just a judge, 2 attorneys, and a handful of people whose pens moved faster than their faces. Daniel sat at the table, his lawyer beside him. Lydia took the opposite seat with hers. Simone remained standing until instructed to sit along the wall. The judge entered and everything stilled. Lydia's attorney spoke first. His voice was smooth, practiced. "My client is deeply concerned about the well-being of her mother-in-law," he said. "Recent changes in routine, unexplained emotional shifts, and the sudden influence of a live-in domestic worker raise serious red flags." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Specifically," the attorney continued, "we believe Mrs. Price is being manipulated, isolated, possibly coached." Simone didn't move. Daniel's lawyer rose. "With respect, Your Honor, the evidence shows the opposite. The only consistent care Eleanor Price has received in recent months has come from Ms. Bennett." The judge turned to Simone. "Ms. Bennett, do you understand the nature of these allegations?" "Yes," Simone said calmly. "And they're false." Lydia scoffed softly, just loud enough to be heard. The judge raised a hand. "We will maintain order." Eleanor was called to speak. She stood slowly, leaning on her cane. The room felt too large for her voice. "Mrs. Price," the judge said gently, "do you feel safe in your home?" Eleanor looked around. At Daniel. At Simone. At Lydia. Her eyes lingered on Lydia last. "I feel safest," Eleanor said, choosing each word carefully, "when I am listened to." Lydia shifted in her seat. "And who listens to you?" the judge asked. Eleanor swallowed. "Simone does. My son does." "I don't always feel heard by Lydia." Lydia's attorney stood abruptly. "Objection. This is emotional interpretation." The judge nodded. "Overruled. Please continue." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. "I don't think Lydia means to hurt me. But she gets frustrated. And when she does, she withdraws." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Simone was asked to speak next. She stood, her voice steady. "I was hired to assist with daily needs. Meals, medication, companionship. Over time, I noticed Mrs. Price becoming anxious at night, afraid to ask for help. I responded." Without authorization, Lydia's attorney cut in. "With humanity," Simone replied. A murmur rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, have you ever encouraged Mrs. Price to speak against her daughter-in-law?" "No," Simone said simply. "I encouraged her to speak at all." Lydia's smile finally cracked. During a recess, Daniel stood in the hallway, staring at a framed photograph of a courthouse opening ceremony from decades ago. Lydia approached him quietly. "You think you're winning," she said under her breath. "But you don't know what you've stepped into." Daniel turned. "Then enlighten me." She leaned closer. If I go down, this family goes with me. Before he could respond, her lawyer called her back inside. When the hearing resumed, the judge cleared her throat. Based on testimony and preliminary findings, she said, this court orders continued suspension of Lydia Price from caregiving responsibilities. Lydia's breath caught audibly. Furthermore, the judge continued, Ms. Bennett will remain in her position pending further review. Simone exhaled softly. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. But the judge wasn't finished. However, she added, new information has been submitted to this court this morning. Daniel's lawyer stiffened. What information? The judge glanced down at a document. A financial disclosure. Regarding Mrs. Price's estate. Lydia sat very still. The judge looked up. It appears significant changes were made to the estate documents 18 months ago. Daniel's heart began to pound. Changes initiated by Lydia Price, the judge said, granting her full medical and financial power of attorney. Daniel turned slowly toward his wife. She met his gaze without blinking. You didn't think I'd let go of everything, Lydia said quietly. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. I didn't understand what I signed, she whispered. The room went very still. The judge closed the file. This hearing is adjourned. But let me be clear. Her eyes fixed on Lydia. This matter is far from over. As they exited the courtroom, Eleanor clung to Simone's arm. Daniel lagged behind, watching Lydia walk ahead, her back straight, her steps unshaken. He realized then that the battle wasn't just about care. It was about control. And Lydia had been planning this long before he ever came home. The ride home was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No radio. No small talk. Just the hum of tires against pavement and the occasional click of Eleanor's cane shifting against the floorboard. Daniel drove with both hands tight on the steering wheel. Simone sat in the back seat beside Eleanor, her posture attentive but restrained, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile calm holding the car together. Lydia followed in her own vehicle. She didn't call. Didn't text. The silence felt intentional. When they reached the house, Daniel noticed something immediately. The front door was unlocked. He frowned. I locked it. Simone met his eyes briefly. She left before us. They stepped inside. The house felt different. Not ransacked. Not messy. Curated. The family photos that once lined the entry table were gone. Daniel's graduation picture. A faded photo of Eleanor holding him as a baby. Even the framed wedding photo that Lydia once insisted sit front and center. All removed. In their place sat a single object. A slim black folder. Daniel picked it up slowly. His name was written across the front in Lydia's handwriting. Inside were copies. Bank statements. Medical forms. Legal documents. Highlighted. Tap. Organized with obsessive precision. She planned this, Daniel muttered. Eleanor sank into the nearest chair, her breathing shallow. I remember her saying it was just paperwork. For emergencies. Simone knelt in front of her. You didn't do anything wrong. Eleanor shook her head. I should have asked more questions. Daniel flipped through the pages. His chest tightened as he recognized signatures. Dates. Witness lines. 18 months ago, he said quietly. That's when I was overseas. Simone's jaw tightened. That's not a coincidence. From upstairs came the sound of a drawer closing. Daniel froze. She's here. Lydia appeared at the top of the staircase moments later, carrying a small suitcase. Her movements were controlled, almost serene. I'm packing a few things, she said calmly. The court made its position clear. I won't stay where I'm not trusted. Daniel stared at her. You were never asked to leave. She smiled thinly. That's not how this works. You've already chosen sides. Simone stood. This isn't about sides. Lydia's gaze snapped to her. You don't get to speak. Daniel stepped forward. She does. In this house she does. Lydia laughed softly. Listen to yourself. Defending hired help like she's family. She's acting like family, Daniel said. You're acting like a stranger. The words hit harder than Daniel expected. Lydia's smile vanished. I sacrificed everything for this family, she said sharply. My career. My privacy. My sanity. Simone couldn't help herself. And yet somehow the most vulnerable person here was afraid to ask for food. Silence slammed into the room. Lydia's face hardened. You have no idea what you're talking about. Eleanor's voice trembled. I was afraid. Lydia turned slowly toward her. Of me? Eleanor nodded. For a moment, something flickered across Lydia's face. Not guilt. Something colder. Then you misunderstood, Lydia said. Fear is just confusion that hasn't been corrected. Daniel felt sick. Lydia zipped her suitcase. I'll be staying with a friend. My attorney will be in touch. She walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, Daniel. You might want to check the safe. The door closed behind her before he could respond. Daniel ran to the study. The wall safe stood open. Empty. No, he whispered. He tore through drawers, cabinets, files. Nothing. Simone appeared in the doorway. What's missing? Daniel turned, his face pale. The originals. The older estate documents. The ones before the changes. Eleanor's breath caught. She said she'd keep them safe. Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from his lawyer. She just filed an emergency injunction. The text read. Requesting exclusive access to Eleanor's assets pending investigation. Daniel sank into the chair. She's freezing us out, he said. Financially. Simone crossed her arms. That's not all she's doing. Daniel looked up. What do you mean? Simone hesitated, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small voice recorder. I wasn't sure it mattered, she said. But now. She pressed play. Lydia's voice filled the room. Come. Measured. If you tell him anything else, Lydia said on the recording, I'll make sure you end up somewhere much worse than this house. Eleanor began to cry. Daniel's hands shook as he took the recorder. Simone swallowed. There's more. From different days. Daniel closed his eyes. This wasn't just a custody or caregiving dispute anymore. It was leverage. And Lydia had just made it clear she was willing to burn everything down to keep control. Outside, headlights flashed briefly through the window. A car pulled up. Daniel looked toward the door. Someone else had arrived. And whoever it was, Lydia hadn't mentioned them at all. The doorbell rang once. Not impatient. Not hesitant. Measured. Daniel and Simone exchanged a look. Eleanor wiped her eyes quickly, straightening in her chair as if bracing herself for whatever came next. Daniel opened the door. A man in his late 50s stood on the porch, rain speckling the shoulders of his dark coat. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the kind of expression that didn't waste time on pleasantries. Daniel Price? The man asked. Yes. My name is Thomas Keegan, he said, holding up an ID. I'm a court-appointed fiduciary. Daniel's stomach dropped. Already? Thomas nodded. Emergency filing was approved an hour ago. I'm here to inventory assets and ensure Mrs. Price's financial interests are protected. Simone stiffened. Protected from whom? Thomas's gaze flicked toward the living room where Eleanor sat quietly. That remains to be determined. Daniel stepped aside reluctantly. Come in. Thomas moved efficiently through the house, asking calm, precise questions. He photographed documents, took notes, checked locks. When he reached the study, he paused at the open safe. Empty? He asked. Daniel nodded. My wife took the originals. Thomas's pen hovered. That will be noted. Eleanor was interviewed next. Thomas pulled a chair close, lowering his voice. Mrs. Price, do you understand why I'm here? She nodded slowly. Because people don't trust each other anymore. Thomas gave a faint, sad smile. That's one way to put it. He asked about finances, about past conversations, about signatures. Eleanor answered honestly even when her voice trembled. When he asked if anyone had pressured her, she hesitated. Simone held her breath. Yes, Eleanor said finally. I felt rushed. By whom? Eleanor closed her eyes. Lydia. Thomas wrote that down. When he finished, he snapped his briefcase shut. For now, all discretionary spending will be reviewed. Accounts may be temporarily limited. Daniel exhaled sharply. So she wins. Thomas met his gaze. This isn't about winning. It's about documentation. Truth tends to surface when people start filing paperwork. After he left, the house felt colder. That night, Daniel barely slept. His phone buzzed constantly. Messages from his lawyer, missed calls from unknown numbers, one email from Lydia's attorney requesting a private mediation. He ignored it. At dawn, Simone was already in the kitchen making tea. She always wakes early when she's anxious, Simone said quietly, nodding toward Eleanor's room. Daniel rubbed his face. This is turning into something ugly. Simone looked at him. It already was. You just weren't here to see it. Daniel didn't argue. Later that morning, a small envelope appeared under the front door. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Type. You should ask your mother about the summer of 1992. Daniel read it twice. What does that mean? Simone asked. Daniel shook his head. I don't know. But Eleanor did. When Daniel showed her the note, her face drained of color. She sat slowly, gripping the arms of her chair. Who sent this? She whispered. We don't know, Daniel said. But Lydia left yesterday. And now this shows up. Eleanor stared at the words as if they might rearrange themselves. That summer, she said softly, was when everything almost fell apart. Simone sat beside her. What happened? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Daniel's father was still alive. Sick. Angry. He trusted Lydia more than me by the end. Daniel frowned. Why? Eleanor hesitated. Because Lydia helped him change things. Things I didn't fully understand. Daniel's heart began to race. Change what? Eleanor swallowed. The first will. The room went silent. There was another version? Daniel asked. Eleanor nodded slowly. One that didn't leave Lydia with so much power. One that named someone else. Simone leaned forward. Who? Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. Me. Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. You were supposed to control your own estate, he said. Yes, Eleanor replied. But your father was afraid. Of hospitals. Of losing independence. Lydia said she could help. Daniel clenched his jaw. And did she? She helped herself, Eleanor said quietly. Daniel realized then that Lydia hadn't just been planning for 18 months. She'd been rehearsing this role for decades. And somewhere, hidden behind missing documents and sealed files, was proof that could unravel everything. The question was whether they'd find it before Lydia buried it for good. The storage facility sat just outside town, wedged between a shuttered auto shop and a row of warehouses that all looked the same. Gray. Anonymous. Easy to forget. Daniel parked and cut the engine, letting the silence settle. This is where she brought the old files? He asked. Eleanor nodded from the back seat. She said it was safer than the house. That nothing important should be kept where emotions live. Simone glanced at Daniel. That sounds like Lydia. The air smelled of dust and oil when they stepped inside. A young clerk behind bulletproof glass slid a clipboard through the slot. Unit number? He asked. Eleanor read it off from memory. Her hands shook as she signed. The hallway was long and narrow, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Each step felt heavier than the last. Unit 317. Daniel unlocked it and pulled the door up slowly. Inside sat neatly stacked boxes. Labeled. Dated. Categorized with obsessive care. Legal. Simone read aloud from one. Medical. Taxes. Daniel exhaled. She archived our lives. They worked quietly, opening boxes, flipping through folders. Most documents were harmless. Old insurance policies. Receipts. Notes in Lydia's handwriting. Then Simone froze. Daniel, she said softly. This one's different. She held up a thin folder, yellowed at the edges. No label. Just a date. June 1992. Daniel's pulse spiked. He opened it carefully. Inside was a copy of a will. An older one. Signed by his father. Witnessed. Notarized. Daniel scanned the page, his breath catching. Primary beneficiary, Eleanor Price. Secondary trustee, Daniel Price. Lydia's name appeared only once. As executor. Limited authority. This changes everything, Daniel whispered. Eleanor leaned closer, her eyes filling. That's the one I remember. Simone flipped to the back. There's a note. Handwritten. In Lydia's careful script. Superseded per later amendment. Originals destroyed. Daniel's hands clenched. She lied. No, Eleanor said quietly. She planned. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Simone stiffened. Someone's coming. Daniel looked toward the entrance just as the unit next door opened. A woman stepped out. Tall, sharp-eyed, mid-40s. She froze when she saw them. Mrs. Price? The woman asked. Eleanor blinked. Yes. The woman hesitated, then smiled tightly. You probably don't remember me. I'm Claire Witt. She stopped herself. Claire Watkins, she corrected quickly. I was your husband's legal assistant. Years ago. Daniel felt a jolt. You worked with my father's attorney. Claire nodded. Briefly. Before I quit. Simone's gaze sharpened. Why? Claire looked at the open folder in Daniel's hands. Her expression shifted. So you found it, she said quietly. Found what? Daniel asked. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. The version Lydia didn't want anyone to see. Eleanor's breath trembled. You knew. I tried to say something back then, Claire said. But I was young. And Lydia, she was very convincing. Daniel's jaw tightened. Convincing how? She said Eleanor was unstable, Claire replied. That decisions had to be made quickly. That your father was afraid. Eleanor closed her eyes. Claire swallowed. I should have pushed harder. Simone spoke carefully. Why are you here now? Claire glanced down the hallway, then back at them. Because Lydia called me yesterday. Asked if I still had copies. Daniel's blood ran cold. And do you? Claire shook her head. No. But someone else might. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message. From an unknown number. You're digging in the wrong place. Daniel looked up sharply. Simone whispered, she knows? Claire backed away slightly. If Lydia's involved again, you need to be careful. She doesn't just move papers. Daniel stared at the will in his hands. She moves people, he said. Outside the unit, footsteps echoed again. Louder this time. Closer. Someone was walking toward them with purpose. Daniel slid the folder back into the box and shut it. Whatever Lydia was doing now, she wasn't watching from a distance anymore. She was closing in. The footsteps stopped just outside the unit. Daniel's pulse hammered as a shadow crossed the concrete floor. He stepped instinctively in front of Eleanor, one hand raised slightly as if that alone could shield her. A uniformed security guard appeared at the entrance, hand resting casually on his belt. Everything all right in here? Daniel exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders in a rush. Yes, sorry. We're just sorting. The guard nodded, eyes flicking briefly to the boxes, then to Eleanor. Take your time. Just don't block the hallway. When he walked away, Simone let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. Claire leaned against the wall, her face pale. I didn't expect her to move this fast. Daniel closed the unit door halfway, lowering his voice. You said someone else might have copies. Who? Claire hesitated. Your father's attorney. He retired shortly after everything was finalized. Moved north. Canada, I think. Eleanor looked up. Henry Lawson? Claire nodded. That's him. Daniel rubbed his temples. Of course she'd assume he was out of reach. Simone crossed her arms. Not unreachable. They left the storage facility quietly, splitting the boxes between Daniel's trunk and Simone's car. Eleanor insisted on holding the thin folder herself, pressing it to her chest like something fragile and alive. The drive home was tense. Daniel kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting Lydia's car to appear. It didn't, but the silence felt strategic. At the house, Daniel barely had time to set the boxes down before his phone rang. His lawyer. Daniel, the man said, skipping pleasantries, we have a problem. Daniel closed his eyes. What now? She's filed for emergency guardianship. Simone froze mid-step. On what grounds? Daniel asked sharply. She's claiming cognitive decline severe enough to warrant immediate intervention. She's pushing for a temporary ruling before the week is out. Daniel looked at Eleanor, who stood quietly near the window, watching birds gather on the lawn. She's trying to erase her, Daniel said. Not erase, the lawyer replied. Override. After the call ended, the house felt smaller. The walls closer. The air heavier. Eleanor sat slowly on the couch. I don't want anyone else making decisions for me. Daniel knelt in front of her. They won't. She searched his face. You can't promise that. Daniel didn't answer right away. Simone stepped in gently. You still have a voice. And now, evidence. Eleanor nodded, but fear lingered in her eyes. That night, Daniel barely touched his dinner. He sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out, timelines scribbled on a legal pad. Simone poured 2 cups of tea and slid one toward him. You're trying to solve 20 years in one night. I'm trying to stay ahead of her, Daniel replied. Simone hesitated. There's something else you should know. Daniel looked up. Lydia didn't just monitor Eleanor, Simone said quietly. She monitored me. Daniel's brow furrowed. How? Simone reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She scrolled, then turned the screen toward him. A message thread. Anonymous. Untraceable. The messages were short. Precise. She's not as helpless as she pretends. You should be careful what you encourage. People get replaced. Daniel felt his stomach twist. When did you get these? Over months, Simone replied. I didn't want to distract you while things were already unstable. Daniel clenched his jaw. She was trying to scare you off. Simone met his gaze. She underestimated how much Eleanor matters to me. A soft sound came from the hallway. Eleanor stood there, her robe pulled tight around her shoulders. I heard voices, she said. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Daniel stood. You can listen. This is about you. Eleanor walked closer, her steps slow but deliberate. Lydia thinks I'm confused, she said. But I remember more than she realizes. Simone's eyes softened. What do you remember? Eleanor sat down. The day she first suggested changing the will. She said it was for peace. That men make better decisions when women simplify things. Daniel felt something snap inside him. She told me, Eleanor continued, that if I didn't cooperate, Daniel would suffer. That businesses are fragile. That accidents happen. The room went silent. Daniel's voice was low. She threatened you. Eleanor nodded. Indirectly. But I understood. Simone reached for Eleanor's hand. Why didn't you tell anyone? Eleanor looked at her sadly. Because when you're old, people stop asking what you want. They tell you what's best. Daniel stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding. This wasn't just manipulation. It was coercion. And Lydia hadn't stopped. As if summoned by the thought, Daniel's phone buzzed again. A text message. From Lydia. You can't protect her forever. Daniel stared at the screen. For the first time he didn't feel fear. He felt clarity. Lydia wasn't trying to win a legal battle. She was daring them to fight back. And Daniel was done stepping carefully. Morning arrived without relief. Daniel stood at the kitchen window, watching sunlight creep across the lawn as if nothing inside the house had shifted. Birds landed, pecked at the grass, and flew away again. Normal life, completely unaware. Behind him, the house was awake. Papers rustled. The kettle clicked off. Eleanor's soft footsteps moved down the hallway, slower than usual but steadier than the night before. Simone joined Daniel at the window. Your lawyer called again, she said. The guardianship hearing is set for Friday. Daniel nodded. That gives us 3 days. 3 days to do what? Simone asked. To prove Lydia crossed a line, he replied. Not emotionally. Legally. Eleanor sat at the table, hands folded around her tea. She's always been careful, she said. She never said things directly. She wrapped them. That's still coercion, Simone said gently. Especially when there's a power imbalance. Daniel turned. But we need proof that holds up. Eleanor looked down. I might have something. Daniel's heart skipped. What? She hesitated, then stood slowly and walked toward her bedroom. Daniel followed, suddenly afraid to rush her. Eleanor opened the bottom drawer of her dresser and reached beneath neatly folded sweaters. Her fingers closed around a small object. A cassette tape. Daniel stared. You kept recordings? Eleanor shook her head. Your father did. He didn't trust his memory near the end. He recorded conversations so he could play them back later. Simone leaned in. With Lydia? Yes, Eleanor said. And with me. Daniel swallowed. Do you know what's on it? Eleanor's voice trembled. Enough. They found an old tape player in the garage, dusty but intact. Daniel cleaned the heads carefully, hands shaking just slightly. When he pressed play, the sound crackled to life. His father's voice filled the room. Weaker than Daniel remembered. Tired. Then Lydia's voice followed. Come. Persuasive. You don't want to burden Eleanor, Lydia said on the tape. She gets overwhelmed. Let me handle the details. There was a pause. Paper shuffling. And if I don't? His father asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Daniel will, Lydia replied. And you know how fragile his position is right now. Daniel's breath caught. Simone's hand flew to her mouth. The tape continued. You wouldn't want his future disrupted, Lydia went on. Markets are sensitive. So are people. Silence. Then his father spoke again. You're asking a lot. I'm offering protection, Lydia said. The tape clicked off. No one spoke. The room felt like it had lost oxygen. That's it, Daniel said hoarsely. That's leverage. Simone nodded. That's more than leverage. That's intent. Eleanor closed her eyes. I forgot how cold she could sound. Daniel stood abruptly. We're taking this to the lawyer. Today. By noon, the house was a flurry of movement. Calls placed. Files scanned. Copies made. Daniel's lawyer listened to the recording twice, then went quiet. This changes the hearing, he said finally. But it also escalates things. Daniel didn't hesitate. Good. After the call ended, Simone lingered in the doorway. Escalation cuts both ways. Daniel met her gaze. She started this years ago. That afternoon, a black sedan parked across the street. It didn't pull into the driveway. It didn't leave. It just sat there. Simone noticed it first. Daniel. He followed her gaze. The windows were tinted. The engine running. Daniel stepped outside, heart pounding, and walked halfway down the driveway. The car didn't move. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. You're making a mistake, Lydia's voice said smoothly. Dragging up the past rarely ends well. Daniel's voice was steady. You should have thought about that before you recorded it. A brief pause, then a soft laugh. Oh, Daniel, that tape won't save you. The line went dead. The car across the street pulled away moments later. Inside, Eleanor stood by the stairs, pale. She knows about the tape. Daniel nodded. She always knows. That evening, as Daniel locked up the house, Simone checked on Eleanor one last time. Eleanor touched Simone's arm. If something happens, don't let her decide who I am. Simone swallowed. Nothing's going to happen. But even as she said it, the power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The house plunged into darkness. Outside, somewhere close, a door slammed. Daniel's voice cut through the dark. Mom? No answer. And for the first time since Lydia left the house, Daniel felt the sharp, unmistakable sense that she hadn't gone far at all. The power came back slowly, like someone had turned a dimmer switch instead of flipping a breaker. Shadows stretched across the walls, distorted, crawling as if they remembered the night's interruption. Daniel moved quickly, flashlight in hand, checking each room. Eleanor stayed close to Simone, gripping her arm like a lifeline. Nothing's wrong, Daniel said, though the unease in his voice betrayed him. Simone nodded, though her eyes stayed sharp, scanning corners, doorways, windows. It doesn't feel safe yet. The front door creaked. Daniel froze. Probably the wind, he muttered, though his mind raced. Simone gestured for him to stay quiet. They moved toward the foyer. The door was ajar. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't remember leaving it open. A note lay on the welcome mat. Small. Neatly folded. Familiar handwriting. Daniel picked it up. Eleanor leaned over his shoulder, reading. Asterisk, we need to talk. Alone. Before it's too late. Asterisk. No signature. No clue. Only the menace behind the words. Simone's hand tightened around Daniel's. She's here. Somewhere close. Daniel looked at Eleanor. Mom, stay in the living room. Eleanor nodded, though her hands shook. Daniel and Simone moved cautiously through the hallways, flashlight beams cutting through the shadows. Every creak, every gust of wind through the trees felt amplified. Then from the kitchen a sound, soft, deliberate footsteps. Simone froze. Two people? Daniel shook his head. One. Someone moving carefully. The footsteps stopped near the pantry. Daniel edged closer, heart pounding. Daniel? Eleanor's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried weight. Be careful. Daniel opened the pantry door slowly. Empty. But the air smelled of almonds and a faint perfume he recognized immediately. Lydia. He exhaled sharply. She hadn't returned yet. But her presence lingered, the faint scent enough to make his stomach twist. Simone checked the back door locks. She could come from anywhere, she muttered. Daniel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Did you find it? Lydia's voice was calm, almost intimate. Did you find the part that proves I was right all along? What do you want? Daniel asked. To talk, she said. Face to face. No lawyers. No cameras. Just us. Daniel's hands clenched the phone. You're done here. You can't threaten anyone in this house anymore. Threat? Lydia's laugh was soft, measured. I'm offering clarity. Daniel hung up. Simone's eyes narrowed. She's escalating. She wants a confrontation. Daniel nodded. Then we need to control it. Eleanor's voice trembled. She won't stop, will she? No, Daniel said quietly. Not until we finish this. By nightfall, Daniel had arranged a secure meeting room at a neutral location. Legal representation. Protective oversight. No surprises. As he prepared to leave, Eleanor clutched his sleeve. Promise me, you won't let her scare you. Daniel bent down, meeting her gaze. I promise. This ends soon. Simone handed him the folder with the 1992 will and the tape. Everything we need is here, she said. Daniel took it. Good. Then it's time we bring the past into the light. Outside, headlights swept across the driveway. Shadows lengthened. Somewhere Lydia was watching. And this time, Daniel knew the confrontation wouldn't just test evidence or legality. It would test everything they'd learned about trust, courage, and what it truly means to protect family. Because Lydia Price wasn't just fighting for control. She was fighting to make everyone question reality itself. And Daniel was walking straight into it. The meeting room smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. Daniel noticed it immediately, the way his senses sharpened whenever he knew he was stepping into something volatile. The room sat on the third floor of a downtown office building. Neutral ground, glass walls, security at the front desk. No hiding places. No drama, at least on paper. Simone sat beside him, posture straight, hands folded calmly in her lap. The folder rested on the table between them. The tape recorder sat just beyond it, silent for now. Across the room, 2 empty chairs waited. Eleanor wasn't here. That had been non-negotiable. Daniel checked his watch. 2 minutes late. The door opened. Lydia walked in as if she owned the building. She wore a dark coat draped neatly over one arm, her expression composed, almost amused. No lawyer. No entourage. Just confidence sharpened into something dangerous. "Daniel," she said warmly. "Simone." Simone didn't respond. Daniel gestured to the chair. "Sit." Lydia raised an eyebrow but complied, setting her coat aside with deliberate care. Her eyes flicked briefly to the folder, then back to Daniel's face. "So," she said lightly, "this is the intervention." "This is the end," Daniel replied. Lydia smiled. "You always did jump to conclusions." Daniel slid the folder forward. "We found the original will." Lydia didn't blink. "Of course you did. Eleanor was always sentimental." Simone leaned forward. "You told her the originals were destroyed." "I told her what she needed to hear," Lydia replied. Confusion is exhausting at her age. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You manipulated her." "I managed her," Lydia corrected. "Someone had to." Daniel reached for the recorder. "You threatened my father." Lydia's smile thinned. "Threatened is such an ugly word." He pressed play. The room filled with the familiar crackle, then his father's voice. Weak. Hesitant. Then Lydia's. Calm. Calculated. As the recording played, Lydia's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her shoulders tensed. Her fingers curled slightly against the armrest. But she didn't interrupt. When the tape ended, silence rushed in. Simone watched Lydia closely. "That's coercion. And you know it." Lydia exhaled slowly. "You think a recording from 30 years ago changes anything?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Because it proves intent. A pattern." Lydia laughed softly. "You're naive if you think this was ever about money." Daniel leaned forward. "Then what was it about?" Lydia's eyes hardened. "Relevance." The word landed heavy. "I gave that family structure," she continued. "Direction. While you chased deals and flew across oceans, I stayed. I handled decline. Weakness. Fear. You created it," Daniel snapped. "I controlled it," Lydia replied sharply. "There's a difference." Simone's voice cut in, steady but firm. "You isolated Eleanor." Lydia turned to her slowly. "And you filled her head." Simone didn't flinch. "I listened." Something flashed across Lydia's face then. Not anger. Resentment. "You replaced me," Lydia said quietly. Daniel stared at her. "This was never your role to own." Lydia stood abruptly. "I held this family together while you were gone." "You dismantled it," Daniel said. She leaned across the table, eyes locked on his. "And now you think you can put it back together by humiliating me?" Daniel stood as well. "By stopping you." Lydia straightened, smoothing her jacket. "You'll regret this." She reached into her purse. Simone tensed. But Lydia only pulled out her phone. She tapped once. Then twice. Before you celebrate, Lydia said calmly, you should know something. Daniel's chest tightened. What? I wasn't the only one your father trusted, Lydia said. And I wasn't the only one who planned ahead. Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. A message from his lawyer. Emergency update. New filing just submitted. You need to see this immediately. Daniel looked up sharply. What did you do? Lydia smiled, small, precise, satisfied. I reminded the system who understands it best. She walked toward the door, heels clicking softly. Enjoy your sense of victory, she said over her shoulder. It doesn't last. The door closed behind her. Daniel stared at the phone, heart pounding. Whatever Lydia had just triggered, it wasn't defensive. It was strategic. And judging by the look on Simone's face, the next move wouldn't just threaten the case. It would threaten Eleanor herself. Daniel barely slept that night. The house felt different, too quiet, too still. Even Eleanor moved slowly, almost as if she sensed something pressing in from the outside. The shadows cast by the streetlights seemed longer, darker, crawling along the walls in ways that made him tighten his fists. Morning came gray and overcast. The kind of morning that feels like it's holding its breath. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly. Texts, emails, notifications. His lawyer's latest update. Lydia had escalated her filing, now requesting emergency access to several joint accounts, including Eleanor's personal savings. She claimed Daniel was interfering with financial care. Unbelievable, Daniel muttered, pacing the kitchen. Simone watched him quietly, her expression taut. She's doing more than fighting for money, Simone said. She's testing you. Seeing how far you'll go. Eleanor shuffled in, gripping her cane. Daniel, maybe we should just let it go. Don't you think she's dangerous? Daniel shook his head. Dangerous? Yes. But she's not untouchable. Simone handed him a folder from the night before, the 1992 will, the tape, and the copies they'd made from the storage unit. Everything is here. Legally, morally, you have leverage now. Daniel exhaled sharply. Leverage, he muttered. Not power. He called his lawyer immediately. We moved today, he said. We set up a counter-filing. Full disclosure. We include every recording, every document. By mid-morning, the law firm's conference room was buzzing. Daniel, Simone, and the lawyer worked in tandem, piecing together timelines, marking evidence, highlighting patterns. Every page seemed heavier than the last, filled with decades of manipulation. Daniel paused at one document, a letter Lydia had written to his father in 1993, subtly instructing him on financial adjustments under the guise of protecting the family. Her handwriting calm, precise, almost affectionate. But Daniel saw the threat beneath every word. Simone leaned over. She's always been planning 10 moves ahead. But this is exhaustive. Daniel nodded, eyes narrowing. Exactly why we can't lose focus. She's predictable but meticulous. By afternoon, Daniel and Simone were on their way to the courthouse again. This time the atmosphere was electric. They weren't just walking into a hearing, they were walking into the culmination of years of hidden battles. Inside, the judge entered promptly. Lydia arrived separately, her demeanor calm, collected. Her attorney flanked her. Daniel noticed the way she glanced at him once, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. Confidence, assurance, threat. The hearing began. Evidence was submitted. The tape played. The 1992 will was presented. Witness testimony from Claire Watkins corroborated inconsistencies. Lydia's calm started to crack, but subtly, almost imperceptibly. Every time Daniel referenced a document, a past conversation, or a timeline, her fingers tightened around the folder in front of her. Her jaw moved in quiet tension. Then the first plot twist hit. Your Honor, Daniel's lawyer said, standing, we have discovered evidence suggesting that the amendments Lydia executed were signed under duress. Lydia's face blanched for a fraction of a second. A flicker unnoticed by most, but Daniel saw it. The judge leaned forward. Explain. Multiple recordings show coercive language, intimidation, and fear instilled in Mrs. Price during these changes, the lawyer said, sliding the recordings across the table. We contend the amendments are invalid due to manipulation. Lydia's attorney attempted to object. Objection, Your Honor, these are subjective claims. The judge cut him off. Let the evidence play. We will review everything. Then came the second twist, the one no one expected. A new voice, female, emerged from the back of the room. Claire Watkins had been present, unseen until now. She approached the bench. Your Honor, she said, I was the legal assistant who handled the original documents. I kept copies hidden in case anything was tampered with. And I have them here. From her briefcase, she revealed a manila folder thick with papers. Daniel's heart leapt. The room went silent. Lydia's face registered shock for the first time in decades. Daniel realized in that moment that the game had shifted. The hidden documents, the tapes, the 1992 will, they were more than evidence. They were proof of decades of manipulation, meticulously documented by someone Lydia never expected to trust again. And now, with the court seeing every detail, every lie, every scheme laid bare, Daniel finally felt the weight of control shift. He looked at Eleanor, sitting quietly in the gallery, hands folded, watching the scene unfold. Her eyes were steady, strong, resilient. For the first time, Daniel thought, maybe they could finally reclaim what was theirs, not just legally but emotionally. But as Lydia's gaze met his, sharp and calculating, he knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because Lydia Price had survived storms before, and she wasn't done testing them. The hearing recessed. The room emptied slowly. Daniel and Simone exchanged a look that carried equal parts determination and dread. Outside, winter sunlight glinted off the courthouse steps. The air was crisp, biting. Daniel turned to Simone. We've got one more step to take. Simone nodded. And this time, she won't see it coming. From the shadows across the street, a figure watched. Lydia Price, smiling and waiting. The courtroom was nearly empty now, the echoes of voices and papers lingering like smoke. Daniel sat beside Eleanor, both of them quiet, both of them bracing. Outside, the winter sunlight bounced off the courthouse steps, but inside the air was heavy with tension, thick enough to feel in every breath. Lydia entered alone this time. No entourage, no lawyer, just her, the calm, poised woman who had shaped so much of their lives, and yet today she looked different. There was a subtle tightness around her eyes, a weight to her movements. The confidence was still there, but it was tempered with caution. The judge called the room to order. This is the continuation of the Price family estate and guardianship case, she began, her tone measured. We have received all submitted evidence, including the original 1992 will, recordings, and corroborating testimony from Claire Watkins. Lydia's face remained still, but Daniel saw her fingers tense against the edge of the table. The judge leaned forward. After reviewing the documentation and considering the evidence presented, this court finds that the amendments executed under Lydia Price's supervision were influenced by coercion and undue pressure. Therefore, the original will stands. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. Relief washed over her face, slow and cautious. Daniel's jaw loosened. He had expected satisfaction, yes, but not this sudden, almost cinematic vindication. The judge continued. Furthermore, guardianship of Mrs. Price remains with Daniel Price, under court supervision for any medical decisions until further review. Ms. Bennett, Simone, remains recognized as caretaker and primary support for Eleanor. Lydia's mouth tightened. Her hands rested calmly on the table, but the slight tremor in her fingers betrayed her composure. Daniel rose slowly, careful not to let his relief show too loudly, not wanting to provoke Lydia. Your Honor, he said quietly, thank you. This means more than I can say. Eleanor squeezed his hand gently, tears forming. I can't believe this, she whispered. The judge nodded. Case dismissed as to emergency filings. Further disputes may be brought, but today's ruling reinstates Mrs. Price's original rights and protections. Lydia rose. Her eyes flicked to Eleanor first, then Daniel. She didn't speak. She turned and left the courtroom, her steps deliberate, controlled. A final glance over her shoulder reminded them that her presence, her influence, wasn't entirely gone, but for the first time she had been checked. Outside, Daniel and Eleanor walked slowly down the courthouse steps. The wind was cold, biting at their faces, but it felt invigorating, like breathing after being underwater for too long. Simone fell into step beside them. "It's over," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, it's not over, but it's finally balanced." Eleanor laughed softly, a sound Daniel hadn't heard in years. "Balanced feels good," she said, her voice breaking slightly. They reached the car, and Daniel turned once to glance at the courthouse. Lydia's shadow had already disappeared from view. Inside, Eleanor finally let herself relax. "I can think for myself again," she said, without fear. Daniel reached over, resting a hand on hers. "We'll make sure it stays that way." Simone smiled faintly, glancing at both of them. "You survived her storm," she said. "And now you can start building calm." Daniel exhaled. "We've got a lot of catching up to do." Eleanor squeezed his hand one last time. "Yes. And this time, we do it together." As they drove away, the city stretched out before them, winter sunlight glinting off the buildings, the streets bustling, alive. For the first time in years, the Price household, and their hearts, felt safe. Daniel glanced at Simone in the rearview mirror. "Thank you. For everything." She simply nodded. "You protected her. That's what mattered." And in that moment, Daniel realized, the battles, the manipulations, the fears, they had survived them all. The storm had passed. But they had emerged stronger, united, and finally free to reclaim their lives. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a whisper of change, reminding them that life would continue, unpredictable as always. And this time they were ready.